Photography in games is nothing new. From the inclusion of photo mode in recent games thanks to the newer consoles sharing features to even games solely dedicated to this mechanic alone, such as ODs like Pokemon Snap, Fatal Frame and the much obscured Africa from PS3 if you even remember that, to more recent ones like in today's case Umurangi Generation, which perfectly fills the bill in this discussion. What makes this game truly unique is how it uses the genre and video games as a medium to tell its story, and in the end it becomes one of the most engrossing experiences of this year. So please join me as I lay out the guts and dissect in detail the core elements of this experience. As previously mentioned, Umurangi is a photography game where you work for Tauranga Express as a courier, and with each new area you're tasked to take photos of specific items or certain criteria in a small sandbox environment. The first obvious aspect that works in favor of Umurangi is the puzzle design. Although the game tells you what pictures you need to take, it also plays a lot with words, forcing you to think outside of the box, and that really forces you to explore the level at the most meticulous detail. And as you progress further through the game, the more complex the requirements get, making you think of the many possible solutions to the obstacle in front of you. This works really well, and at moments I really felt bamboozled by the wordplay. You're not forced to take pictures of what you're asked, however, and instead, the game actually encourages going off the beaten path with its open-ended sandbox level design. As with each mission, alongside the bounties, you also have side bounties that reward you with a myriad of tools and post-process effects you'll learn throughout the game if you complete every task under 10 minutes, which is super feasible once you nail the overall layout. Not only does this structure encourages multiple playthroughs, it also incentivizes exploration and player expression. For example, one of my favorite lenses is the fisheye lens, as I've always been a fan of those lenses due to the funny oval effect, and the cartridge lens that emulates the screen effect of a Game Boy. There's also the macro DLC, which introduces skate rollers that allows you to move quickly through the level, and a spray can, hence the Jet Set Radio references. Another cool aspect is how the game balances what it considers good and good. Art is subjective. What might look appealing to you might look repulsive or disinteresting to someone else, and the game takes that into account. Here, you're judged by what the game calls the 3 C's: color, content, and composition. Color functions as a spectrum. The more color you have, the more points you'll earn. You're not penalized by having a picture with less color, as those are judges moody. Content judges the amount of elements you have in a shot, no matter the type of object, besides blue bottles, and I'll explain why later. And composition is a myriad of criteria such as the amount of people, angles, and other stuff. This level of freedom stems from the game's creator, Veselakov, or Vez for short, philosophy of respectful design as he calls it. Something he describes in comparison to traditional media as, agency is with a community, not the designer who comes in. For this game, the players decide how they want to take the photos and what is a good photo, not the game. This philosophy plays really well into the game's design pillar of freedom, as by what I described previously, the only limits bound to you are your imagination. This is all engorged by the beautiful lo-fi PS1 aesthetic art style, from the characters' low poly models, simplistic and stylized textures, and colorful environments. It's one of the few games that actually doesn't stop here and further iterates on the style, mainly on the environments, which are packed and littered with a ton of small and big objects and trinkets. And all of this level of detail probably wouldn't be possible to achieve back in the 90s for all I know. All of these tools and systems the game offers genuinely provide what I would say pure creative freedom. Pure because in a sense, when a game gives you creative freedom in some form, you tend to be limited by external factors that devs usually don't take into account in the grand scheme of things, such as invisible walls and such. This supposed freedom aids in support of Umurangi's many tools, and the scoring systems never discourages you from staying off the beaten path. As I've mentioned previously, art is subjective and has different meaning. The only thing I honestly have to complain about this whole structure is how some bounties can get confusing in both terms of appropriate perspective in which the picture needs to be taken and the actual words, as in the very rare moments I had to take out a guide with bounty words I had no knowledge of, given that English is not my first language. Now that we have an overall idea of the gameplay structure, I would like to shift the focus to one of the game's most impressive feats, its storytelling. Before I move on, I would like to preface that the following section contains major spoilers for the game. I believe everyone should play Umurangi and experience the unfolding of the story by themselves, but if spoilers don't affect you that much, or you just don't care, then get ready. If you're, however, sensitive to this, then skip to the time marked on the screen right now. So, without further delay, let's discuss the story. Throughout the game, as you take the various requested pictures, specifically in the first level, everything seems and feels like a cozy afternoon, just chilling with the homies, fucking around and capturing some photographs to save the memories you'll further reminisce in the future. But as you start to progress further, you'll notice something's not right. Newspaper mentioning of an ongoing chaos, graffitis strongly asserting the stance of the many disgruntled residents of Tauranga, the sense of hopelessness roaming through the air, and the slow decay of the society. Umurangi means red sky in the Te Reo Maori language, spoken by the native Maori people natural from New Zealand. In a deeper meaning, the red sky alludes to its core message, the last generation. The last generation to witness the end of the world at the hands of a dysfunctional organization fueled by incompetence and authoritarianism during a kaiju invasion. The game relies heavily in its environmental storytelling, and how it, without words, conveys the events unraveling before your eyes. Most of the themes tackle the ideologies of neoliberalism and fascism, or therefore, the opposition of these awful and repulsive ideals. In this case, how the UN fully gains control and borders New Zealand amidst the kaiju attacks, the media suppression, and as representative of gameplay, you can take pictures of the blue bottles I mentioned, these jellyfish-like things that are revealed to be body parts of the kaiju, functioning as hiding the truth from the people, given that it earns your income, and to a full extent, colonialism and how it pins and fogs the low-income citizens of Tauranga under dingy and shitty environments as the wealthy get a heads up. And the macro DLC further makes these realities and ideas poignant and in your face, with the ever-constant presence of fostering of the wealthy, the concealing of concerning occurrences, and even the goddamn presence of protests and police brutality on full extent. And not the mild type, the type that makes you disgusted by the tactics used to suppress marginalized voices. The music also strengthens the situation. The game's composer, Adolf Nomura, also known as Thor High Heels on YouTube, is one talented fellow, and throughout the years, he's been experimenting with different music genres in this project, from drum and bass, funk, new jazz, post-punk, trip-hop, and many more. A big bulk of Umurangi's OST is based on music produced years prior by Nomura, but in this case, handpicked individually by Vess. But it's not the end of the story, as Nomura also composed original tracks for the game. The final result is this gem of variety that paints the ugly but sometimes hopeful picture of the city, its citizens, the collective anger and sadness lumbering, and the ever-constant bombardments of color. It is without a doubt one of my favorite OSTs of the year, and one I've been listening to non-stop for the past few weeks. The beauty of all of this unraveling comes, as I explained previously, from Vess's philosophy of providing player freedom through mechanics. No player will play once through this game and not feeling that something's wrong, and if you happen to do so somehow, then the Macro DLC perfectly represents these ideas into realistic scenarios you're put in. Having the ability to freely and fully digest the small and nuanced pieces around the environments is a beautiful thing most games struggle to pull off without feeling preachy and forceful, and the fact that this game manages to perfectly and smoothly transition into this deep rabbit hole is nothing short of Masterful. Umurangi also happens to be that odd case of releasing at the right time. It comes to no surprise that 2020 was a terrible year all around. The Australian bushfires, the presence of a global pandemic, the many cases of racial crimes against the Asian community, and the unexpected and extreme outcry of the black community against police brutality and the reform of the police system in America. It was a heavy year, no doubt about it, and the arrival of Umurangi further extended the idea of this is what the world might become if we don't do something. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that I got a review copy, which once more, thanks for the devs for the opportunity. And all the footage you have seen thus far is from the Nintendo Switch version that just came out at the beginning of June, so let's talk about that. In terms of overall stability, the game is a near perfect optimized port. Controls wise, you can make use of the gyro when using the camera, which is pretty neat and super intuitive. I haven't encountered any bugs present in most of my playthrough, and performance is 97% solid most of the time. And what I mean by that is that even though the game targets 30 frames per second, there are occasional moments where the frame drops when there are too many objects on screen, and in worst case scenarios it can go as low as 20 or below. Same case with portable mode, as I believe it can actually dip lower. I wasn't that much bothered with it, as I'm pretty used to unstable frame rates, but if you're pretty sensitive with low frame rates, then the PC version is your best bet. Another point I omitted from the art style discussion is the resolution. Most ports on the Switch tend to run at a low resolution, and to their dismay, the image is either jagged to the teeth or blurry as a layer of Vaseline. In the case of Umurangi, and this is just a personal opinion, I think it works really well with the art style. Given how heavily stylized it is to its core, it strongly enforces the visual low-poly, lo-fi aesthetics it aims for. At the end of the day, I was curious as to what the game was about. I made sure not to look up info on it ever since it came out last year, for the chance of not getting spoiled, and to my surprise, this was one of the most rewarding experiences I had, and honestly, Umurangi Generation is one of the best games of this year, and my personal game of the year. It's a rare breed of games that it embraces politics and uses it to fuel its narrative and distinct visual presentation. Not only did it spoke to me at a personal level with the macro DLC, but it also proved to me why I love video games and why I decided to be a developer myself, to empower different perspectives in this industry filled with formalities that desperately need to be reformed, not only for the sake of this new generation of diverse game developers, but for the medium as well. If you consider games as an art form, then Umurangi Generation belongs and deserves to be considered as one, as it contains both style in its visual presentation and gameplay design, and substance in its engorging soundtrack, thoughtful narrative, and its tackling of geopolitical themes culturally relevant in our current time. Hey, welcome! You finished the video and now you're here listening to this voice. So hey, thanks for watching the video. I actually struggled with this one. I was having issues with the script. I've been writing this since today is the 1st of July as of the recording of this audio. And I've been writing the script ever since the 14th of June, and I've been struggling a lot with it, mainly with the structure. So I had to rewrite it like some 4 or 5 times until I had to reach to a certain conclusion, because it was too much. It was eating too much of my time. So hey, here's the final result. I hope you like it. So don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, share it with your friends, family, you know, that jazz. Don't forget the tingle the dingle. Oh, that sounds so corny. Oh my god, that's good. That's actually good. Please tingle the dingle, subscribe, share, leave a like, comment, and yeah, I will see you next video. Bye.